I'll say the vision of the Bluegrass Institute is a commonwealth where liberty thrives, where government is restrained, and where free markets drive prosperity. And we express that through work on economic competitiveness, educational freedom, and criminal justice.
This is Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio.
Welcome to Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio, the podcast where we introduce you to the courageous champions of liberty who are transforming their countries, their communities, and our world. Today's guest is Caleb Brown. That's a name familiar to many for his longtime work as Director of Multimedia at the Cato Institute. Well, he's now the CEO of the Bluegrass Institute in Kentucky. So why would a seasoned national media voice leave Washington, D.C. to lead a state-level think tank? And what unique policy battles are playing out in the heart of Appalachia? And how did Atlas Network's executive Accelerator help prepare him for this new leadership role? Well, we're about to find out. And Caleb and I had this conversation at the Atlas Network Liberty Forum and Freedom Dinner in New York City. So you may hear a little bit of background noise. You may see some lights flashing, but it'll give you a glimpse of the experience that we shared together. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Well, Caleb, thank you so much for being on the program today. Excited for the conversation that we get to have. But I want to start off with the question I always do. Here we are in New York City for the Liberty Forum and Freedom Dinner. And so surely you've run into someone that you're meeting for the first time. It always happens. Yeah. And they say, well, Caleb, what do you do? So in your words, how do you answer that?
Well, in this environment here, it's pretty, I don't have to explain it very much.
Sure.
But for somebody I'm meeting for the first time in my small town in central Kentucky, I say I run a small state-based think tank and that we advocate on behalf of liberty to state and local governments.
So I want to talk about why it's a think tank in Kentucky for you now, because everybody knows a lot about your story before that. We'll get to that in a minute, but let's keep it right here on Kentucky. What was it that pulled you back to the Bluegrass State?
So I went to high school in Kentucky. I went to college in Kentucky. I was a journalist for several years in Kentucky. And when I got the opportunity, when David Bose came calling from the Cato Institute and said, we've got this podcast thing that you might want to do, I went and did that for 10 years.
Yeah.
Met a nice lady, married her, had a child.
That'll happen.
And as you may know, things get expensive when you have a child in Washington, D.C.
Sure.
One of the most expensive housing markets in America. We started looking around and came back to Kentucky. And I had worked for the Bluegrass Institute in 2005 and 2006. And when I moved back to Kentucky and this job came open, I thought, maybe it is time for a shift. And maybe this is a new challenge that I ought to take on. And so with the support of my family, I took the job. And as of this recording, 6 months, I've been CEO of the Bluegrass Institute.
6 months. Congratulations. You mentioned housing, and I want to talk about housing. Yeah. But first, just an overview for our audience that's listening or watching that may not be familiar with the Commonwealth and may not have interacted with Bluegrass Institute before. Talk about the organization, mission, vision, targets.
I'll say the vision of the Bluegrass Institute is a commonwealth where liberty thrives, where government is restrained, and where free markets drive prosperity. And, we express that through work on economic competitiveness, educational freedom, and criminal justice. And so, in the near term, some of our focus has been on housing. It's one of the most important economic issues facing Kentucky, facing the United States.
Sure.
Frankly, and states that are moving on this issue, I think, stand to reap great rewards, both politically and demographically and economically.
Yeah, you and I talked a little bit before we sat down here for this recording about this issue and just the breadth and depth of it. Share some of that detail. I mean, if people aren't paying attention to a housing crisis, they should be, or they will be very soon, right?
There are many millions of underproduction of houses in the United States of America, 200,000 of which are in Kentucky.
Wow.
And states that are interested in having a workforce that businesses want to make use of, and thus attracting business into the state, should be paying very close attention to this issue. For young people, it's absolutely critical. I bought my home 5 years ago, and since then, my home value, according to various websites, has gone up 50%.
Right.
And
what an investment.
If you're a young person, yeah, that's fine for me.
Yeah, sure.
But if you're a young person, maybe you're thinking about getting married. Maybe you're thinking about starting a family. If you don't already have the opportunity to own a home, and you're spending a third or a half or more of your take-home pay on housing, a lot of options just close off for you.
Right.
And this problem is largely created by government, as so many problems are. And government getting out of the way here, reasserting on behalf of individual property owners the fact that they own the property, and that government needs a very good reason to tell them that they can't use it the way they want, is just it's really a natural fit for us, because we care about economic dynamism. We care about having liberty extended as far as it can within the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And of course, we care about property rights. It's a foundation of society, or I should say American society, that basic property rights ought to be respected. And when you stop respecting them, you get bad results. This is one of them.
What would you see as one or two reforms, successes that you could have in Kentucky that could really move the needle on this issue?
So several states have adopted what's known as the shot clock. We like that in Kentucky.
Yeah,
big basketball
I was going to say,
we think about the shot clock, and I'm glad that that's the phrase that people use. But the shot clock basically says if you filed a permit and that permit is not acted on within a timely fashion by your local government, that your project is deemed approved. Now, you could go further. You could say, forget the shot clock.
Yeah.
You can take your proposal, your plans, to an architect. It's called third-party review.
Right.
The architect will review them, make sure that they meet the state building code, make sure that the building's not going to fall down.
Right.
And then stamp it, and you're good to go. And the government doesn't need to be bothered with approving a permit or sitting on your permit, as the case may be. And so those are two very big reforms. But there are many others. A lot of these problems developed over time with small restrictions.
Yeah.
And most of those restrictions have nothing to do with advancing Kentuckians' health or safety.
Yeah.
And reasserting property rights means, hey, if I want to put an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, on my property for a mother-in-law, for a grandma, for a renter, for a short-term renter, that I can do that. And people are going to make different choices about what kinds of housing they want. People are going to make different choices about how they're going to adjust their own property. But giving everyone the widest range of opportunity to do that is what is going to address our housing crisis.
So what other issues in Kentucky have your attention right now, or do you see as being on the forefront besides housing that Bluegrass is focused on?
So certificate of need is a big one.
Oh, sure.
So most states, I think, have largely abandoned certificate of need. This was a policy pushed by the federal government in the 70s. And then by the 1980s, they figured out that it was a horrible mistake.
Right.
But by then, a lot of constituencies had developed, a lot of incumbent producers of healthcare services had decided, no, we like this policy just fine because it entrenches our privilege and it keeps us in charge of healthcare delivery in the Commonwealth. And so I think a lot of those need to go away.
Yeah.
If for no other reason that it's literally a cartel. And I don't mean that like it's kind of like a cartel. The exact technical arrangement of
Yeah,
the
explain that.
certificate.
Go into detail.
Yeah.
with that.
So what I tell people when I talk about this is imagine if you want to open a restaurant in your town and you've got your permit, you've got your business model, you think you're going to go like gangbusters. Let's say you're selling burrito bowls.
Sure.
There's one more thing that you need, which is the permission of McDonald's, Wendy's, Taco Bell, KFC,
Right.
and or some other group of large entrenched interests in order to open your business. And the determination that they are empowered to make is, does the community need this? Which for somebody who cares about liberty,
Right.
You would say, so what?
Right.
We're going to find out if the community
Right.
wants
Sure.
this. Whether they need it is a completely separate issue. And so that committee made up of those interests invariably is going to say, no,
Right.
our community doesn't need these burrito bowls. Taco Bell has something like that. Just go there.
Right.
Which is extremely disrespectful to the preferences that people have in one of the most sensitive areas of human existence, which is healthcare.
Healthcare. Sure.
And so thankfully we don't do that with restaurants, but we do it in healthcare. And getting rid of a lot of those needless, old, restrictive systems is one of our top priorities. Now we've got rid of one in just this last year for freestanding birthing centers. Now, why that ever needed to be something that a committee empowered by the government would get to decide is beyond me.
Sure.
But think about that for a moment. When an expectant mother goes in to give birth to a hospital or at home or somewhere else, her comfort is the most important thing to make that process go smoothly.
Sure.
I've learned this through the experience of 3 different childbirths where I was there, but not making it happen.
Right.
But what difference does it make whether or not a community needs, strictly speaking, a facility that many expectant mothers want?
Yeah, that's good.
And how disrespectful is it that you have a government committee telling women that their actual desires about the time, manner, and circumstances of giving birth to a child just aren't that important. Your preferences aren't that important. It's really disrespectful.
Sure.
And we see it all across the healthcare industry. So we're hoping to eliminate more certificates of need in the coming years.
6 months on the roll, as you mentioned before. Tell me something that you've learned or something that you're discovering now that's challenging you in the role.
So an opportunity that I didn't really I think I knew it intellectually, but I don't think I really got it viscerally, is that lawmakers want someone or an organization that they can trust to be fundamentally honest with them about the impacts of public policy decisions that they are empowered to make. Now, lawmakers are good at getting elected. They may not be good at other things related to policy.
Sure.
We have a part-time legislature. Lawmakers in Kentucky
overwhelmingly
go back to real jobs after their legislative term, their time in Frankfurt is up. And so I think it presents a huge opportunity for groups like ours and others to give our best reading of the evidence regarding policy reforms that are likely to be on the table. And thankfully, the Bluegrass Institute has long been looked at as a liberty-friendly, economically literate organization that is going to just give the best evidence that we have.
So I want to talk about the environment that you operate in, because I find most people that study or are paying attention to American public policy or politics across the country, when they get to Kentucky, they expect the state to just be a red state, right, in terms of Republican control and dominance. Yet there is a Democrat governor right now.
Yeah.
And so that strikes them as, well, what is the playing field? What are the politics of Kentucky like? And so it seems to me like you have an interesting environment that you're operating in to get public policy reform, but an inviting our environment as well.
So I always laugh a little bit when I hear people who are not from Kentucky, like on cable news, describing the Kentucky electorate.
Yeah.
Because Kentuckians have a hard time getting a handle on the Kentucky electorate, and people from out of state, I think it's really hard to come by expertise on how Kentuckians think about things. Because in 2024, for example, Donald Trump won handily, and yet an amendment to legalize school choice in the Commonwealth of Kentucky failed almost 2-1.
Really?
And so when people try to imagine, well, but Donald Trump is for school choice, but the Kentucky electorate said no.
Right.
So there are different trends there at work, and I think there's a strain in the Kentucky electorate that likes things the way they are just fine, and doesn't really attach current problems to the political decisions that they're asked to make in the voting booth. And they're perfectly rational.
Sure.
They have real lives to go back to. They're not policy nerds.
Yeah.
And so part of our job is to help people understand that there are connections between policy and human outcomes.
Yeah, we have, my home state of Oklahoma, we have a similar dynamic where such rural reach that especially has influence in the legislature and in the public policy process. And when you have issues like school choice that come up, there's a lot of attitude there that will be leaning maybe politically to the right. But yet when it comes to some of these issues, it's like, well, you need to reform your town, but my school's fine, my local, right? There's this kind of attitude you see. Strikes me that Kentucky might have some of that same dynamic.
Yeah, the attitude regarding public schools is very similar to the attitude that people have about Congress, which is my congressman's fine,
right?
But the system broadly is not good.
Right.
Thank goodness our school is good.
Right. Okay, so let's draw back a little bit on Caleb's story. You mentioned that you spent quite a bit of time doing a podcast with Cato that I think a lot of people know you from and have paid attention to your work.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that experience, going up there and going through that journey and running a podcast. What did you learn? What did you enjoy most about it?
Well, so like I said, I went to high school in Western Kentucky.
Sure.
The most notable person in my world who also came from Western Kentucky is David Boats, who emailed me when I was in college and asked if there were other libertarians in Kentucky. I said, I don't know. But he found me because I had put some probably bombastic statements on my university-provided web space at the University of Louisville. And so he and I became friends.
Yeah, sure.
And by this time, of course, I already knew who he was because he'd edited books that I had read in high school because, like I said, policy nerd. And so I was a journalist and then did a lot of radio, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
And then when this podcasting gig came open in 2007, they called me and said, hey, come on up.
Yeah.
So I did, and was, it's a pretty big difference between Louisville, Kentucky and Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And so immediately learned that there are a lot of that everything's very transactional in Washington, D.C., and that Cato at the time was a very special place in the sense that the ideas came first.
Right.
And what are the likely consequences of this versus that? Let's look at them with clear eyes and try to figure that out. And my task was to sort of package that and give libertarian ideas their best presentation, push back when it was appropriate, and try to build an audience that was interested in, my task was to present this as honestly as I possibly could.
So we were just on a panel together here at the Liberty Forum talking a little bit about this, and you made some comments that I thought were pretty powerful. Would you mind sharing here, again, what advice you might give to other peers that are saying, hey, I'm I'm thinking of starting a podcast, or hey, we're trying to communicate better or approach our communications differently and scale up, what's the first thing you'd tell them to do, or what kind of advice would you tell them with their approach?
Well, I think it's okay to imagine who your audience is. If the cost is low enough in terms of your time and energy,
Sure.
Maybe it's worth playing around with a little more. But you definitely should have an idea of who you want to talk to.
Sure.
And understand those people and their concerns and maybe some of their prejudices before you really start targeting them. But more broadly, I think there is an enormous appetite right now for people in the media to be more honest and to present ideas clearly and not entirely endorsing everything that comes down the pike from their ideological friends.
Sure.
And I think that kind of authenticity speaks to a lot of people, and that there is a real appetite for people who are just going to give you a straight presentation, in a sense, out of respect for you, the audience.
Yeah, sure.
And try to develop a parasocial relationship with an audience that allows them to be able to trust you, so that you can be not just trusted, but trustworthy. And there's a lot of internal work you have to do to get to that. There's a lot of self-questioning that you have to do to get there.
Yeah, I was thinking, I mean, 10 years of hosting the podcast, right?
17, almost 18.
18 total. Did you feel a sense of stewardship with the audience or whatnot
100%.
While you were putting the show together and everything? Okay.
And so I would tell people that, my loyalty in executing this product is not to Cato. It is to the audience that we're trying to talk to. And so sometimes, occasionally, that would mean pushing back on
talking
our own scholars,
sure,
on an issue that they brought up. Now, my preferred method of dealing with that would be to ask them before we started recording about that, and just say, well, maybe this wasn't a very good idea for us to record.
Right.
But stewardship is a good way to phrase it, because my job is to maintain that link to that audience and to show them as much respect as I can.
Your career started even before that in journalism, right? You mentioned that earlier. You're on radio for quite a while in Kentucky. So there has to be something here that interests you about the art of communications and about journalism from an early age on till now. What is it that's captivating for you?
Boy, I don't know. I used to really enjoy just presenting provocative ideas.
Get people to think, kind of challenge them a little.
Ideally get people to think. And I think there's a seductive aspect to showing somebody that they're wrong about something. Which as good as that might feel in the moment, frankly, isn't very productive.
Right.
And if you can gently help someone understand that maybe they're not thinking too clearly about something, that you're humble enough to say, well, maybe it's possible that I'm actually wrong about that.
Wow.
That you actually
That's
can
powerful.
Have a lot more impact on people. And as we said there, we shouldn't aspire just to be trusted. We should aspire to be trustworthy.
So I want to come back to Kentucky, right? So here you are, you're from Kentucky, get an opportunity to take the ideas and the ideals that you believe in and you're passionate about, go work with them in an industry that doing a profession in journalism that you're quite capable of, but then you build an audience. So now you've got a family and you're thinking it's time to maybe get out of DC. You could have gone anywhere. You're an extremely talented guy. You probably had opportunities everywhere. You came back to Kentucky. Why?
Well, actually, it's because my wife had a job offer in Kentucky. She's a bit of a researcher, a noted researcher herself.
There you go.
And so we had an opportunity to come back to Kentucky. And so I used that as leverage to get to move back and continue working for Cato.
Sure. So you're back in Kentucky. you see an opportunity, decide to step in and take over a leadership role. So let's talk about leadership now.
Yeah.
What attracted you most to the opportunity to lead an organization and build an organization?
Yeah.
What is it that you're learning about yourself in that process?
Well, it's very different. What I'm learning about myself is that I wasn't as well organized as I thought I was, given
preach.
given
I'm
the
with you.
volume of
Yeah.
things that I have to deal with on a daily basis. But also, you learn fairly quickly what must be done, and try to balance that with longer term strategy, and try to cultivate the kinds of relationships that with people who are genuinely interested in the same things you are, and genuinely interested in growing the organization that you're trying to grow.
So what are some of those fingerprints that you're putting on the organization now that you can see having impact on growth and opportunity going forward?
Well, a lot of it is saying no.
Interesting.
Okay. To things. A lot of sometimes you'll have some policy scholars who are very interested in a subject.
Yeah.
And it doesn't align with a strategic priority. And the strategic priority is part of what we take out to our partners and say, here's what we're trying to do. And so that at its best is something that should discipline your organization in terms of focus, and should discipline your own decision making when it comes to what you're going to work on and what you're not going to work on.
So, folks, we're talking with Caleb Brown from the Bluegrass Institute in Kentucky. And if you'd like to learn more about Caleb's work and that of his peers there in Kentucky, you can go to atlasnetwork.org, where you can learn not only about what's happening throughout organizations in the United States, but the worldwide freedom movement. And while you're there, why don't you join the Atlas Club with my wife and I, or make a $25 donation to help the worldwide freedom movement and receive Freedom's Champion magazine. Caleb, let's talk about Atlas Network and
I'm
your
going to
relationship.
stop you right there, Michael.
Yep.
Visit bluegrassinstitute.org.
So, Caleb, let's talk about the partnership with Atlas Network.
Yeah.
And your experience. What has that partnership been like? What has it meant to Bluegrass Institute?
Well, so working at Cato,
Yeah.
Atlas was a block away.
Sure.
Right on the other side of an Edmund Burke statue was the Atlas Network.
Yeah.
And so I have known Tom Palmer's since 2000 for 25 years.
Sure.
And I've known David Bowes longer, and came to really appreciate the fact that when I speak with people who run think tanks in Ghana, in India,
Sure,
in Mexico, or work with groups in Ukraine,
yeah,
or other places where the rule of law is not strong, where private property rights are not protected, where basic freedoms that we definitely take for granted in the United States are not respected. It really gives me a lot of perspective on the work that I'm trying to do.
Sure.
And, it doesn't make it small potatoes, but it does give me, like I said, perspective on how much worse things could be.
Sure.
I did the Executive Accelerator program earlier this year, which is run by Alex and Patty, among others.
Oh, yeah.
And, transitioning from a communications role to a CEO role it's such a huge transition for me.
Sure.
And they made it very, very easy for me to focus on the kinds of decisions that only a CEO can make.
Yeah.
And focus less on the things that might make me feel good in the moment, but are not ultimately serving the needs of the organization.
Sure.
And I cannot, to people in the network, I will say, Executive Accelerator is a tremendous program. It is very well designed. You will get some incredible help at developing yourself as an executive in your organizations. And I can't say enough good things about it.
So you've been to Atlas Network events before. Obviously, as we mentioned, we're here in New York at the biggest.
This is my first time here.
So this is your first time
Yeah.
at the Liberty Forum and Freedom Dinner in New York. But if you run into a peer or anyone else that is in the freedom movement and working in a libertarian organization,
Yeah.
and they're thinking about coming to one of these events, what would you say to them?
I think it would depend on why.
Yeah.
I think if you want to connect with people around the globe, if your aspirations in terms of policy are global, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
If you want to be inspired
Yeah.
by a lot of the work that's being done, that would be this is one of the best places to do that as well. Yeah.
What if you ran into a donor or a philanthropist that's supporting the work and supporting grants that may help Bluegrass Institute or other organizations, and they just said, hey, I'm thinking about contributing or giving? What would you say to them?
I would say definitely support the Bluegrass Institute
Right.
immediately and generously,
Right.
and annually.
Yeah.
But for this is the kind of place where a lot of people who want to have impact but don't have the means meet people who want to have impact and don't have the strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
But do have the means.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so that it's it's a wonderful event for that purpose, where people can pick on their ideas, pick apart their strategies,
Yeah.
rework them perhaps, and learn from each other about how to keep freedom alive around the globe.
If you run into or you're talking with a donor or philanthropist, and they wonder, they're contributing, they're trying to help a free market think tank, right? A libertarian organization. They're trying to help in the worldwide freedom movement for
Yeah.
organizations to grow. But they say, am I really making a difference? Like, it does it really matter? Is it a drop in the bucket? How would you approach that question?
Well, I would point to people like Javier Milei and
That's
say,
good.
look, there's a huge movement that had to rise up along with him in order to put him in office, and his policies have dramatically shifted the material well-being
Sure.
of people in that country. And for the United States of America, I think it is a more precarious time for freedom, but that's, I think, all the more reason to invest in ideas and invest in people who understand what actually drives prosperity.
Yeah.
And what actually makes America great.
You mentioned something there that I've got to ask you about, because it's interesting how you worded it. It's a precarious time for freedom in the United States. And for someone who has been working on libertarian causes, and gosh, we add studying them, we're talking a couple decades here.
Yes.
Yet you make that statement. Why? And what does that mean?
Well, we've seen a slow, steady decline in freedom in the United States. I think the high water mark was 9/11. And we've seen a lot of freedoms being not stripped away, but fading away. And for people like us who treasure basic liberties and understand that these institutions are critical and that they are not inevitable, it's really important for that message to receive a full-throated defense in public on an ongoing basis.
Is that one of the kind of charges you feel at Bluegrass Institute?
I think everybody does.
Yeah.
We have to, of course, navigate short-term political realities to some extent, but broadly speaking, the principles, individual liberty, free markets,
Sure.
limited government,
Sure.
are the kinds of things that ought to be universal. And the reason that we want this policy reform versus that policy reform is because we think it will advance those principles.
Right.
And so we might talk about certificate of need or housing reform or regulation or school choice,
Sure.
or criminal justice reform. But the bottom line is we are trying to keep these institutions strong, and we are trying to maintain liberty for our children.
You and I talked earlier, and you said something that I thought was pretty interesting. A lot of people would assume that like communications is just that, like that's your world, your passion, and you always think in terms of like communications outcomes.
Yeah.
But but that would lead to like, well, we've got a digital strategy at Bluegrass, and we're just trying to do this and hit numbers. But you were speaking more about like human interaction and the personal communication and building trust with somebody.
Yeah.
So that strikes me as a strong foundation for Bluegrass Institute that you all have. So what kind of receptiveness have you gotten in Kentucky since you've taken over the role?
It's been pretty strong.
Yep.
I think there is that desire to actually address problems and not punish perceived enemies. A lot of politicians in Kentucky in particular have spent an inordinate amount of time just beating up on this or that perceived enemy.
Really?
And I think there's a growing appetite for actually addressing honestly across party lines, not playing a lot of partisan politics.
Sure.
I think there's a large appetite for just addressing problems and doing so with humility and honesty. And my hope is to meet as many of those people as I can as I travel the state.
What is the future for Kentucky? What do you see?
Well, nothing's inevitable, but I think Kentucky has a tremendous opportunity to be a leader economically. Now we're toward the bottom of the pack on a lot of measures that are considered good things. And I think it will require a little bit of bravery, but there's nothing that says that Kentucky won't be more like North Carolina, more like Florida in terms of economic dynamism, in terms of economic performance, and delivering for people, for families, for individuals, the kinds of robust material well-being that we associate with prosperity.
So I want to go all policy wonk on you for a little bit and dive deeper into an issue, because there's similarities where you live in Kentucky to with where I am in Oklahoma. And that is, we have a state directly to our south that has no income tax and has a growing economy that we're continuing to compete with, right? So in Oklahoma, we deal with so much from Texas, right? Some days we think that we're Texas' biggest competitor, and then other days we're like the largest county in Texas, and we try to just feed off and adopt it. But so much of the economic disparity is driven by tax policy in the two states. Do you see the same thing with Kentucky and Tennessee and what's happening in Nashville and everything else? Do you talk about that in Kentucky, or is it just a different dynamic up there?
Well, so I think it's natural, and something that we've leaned into is, how are we doing compared to the states that touch Kentucky?
Yeah, sure.
And across a lot of metrics, we're doing worse. Across some metrics, we're doing better.
There you go.
I will say that Kentucky's done a pretty good job when it comes to tax policy. We've adopted a phase out of the state income tax, which means that as long as certain revenue targets are hit, as long as the so-called rainy day fund for emergencies is maintained and replenished, the legislature is effectively free to lower personal income tax rates on a regular basis. And so I think it aligns the incentives pretty well for lawmakers to focus on things that will deliver a greater economic dynamism, that will deliver savings from government spending. Remember, if you're cutting spending, that's often just as good as more revenue coming in the door. So I think the incentives are aligned well there. It took a long time to get there. I will say that I think the Bluegrass Institute played a good role. This is before my time, but I think the Bluegrass Institute played a significant role in setting the stage, in framing the decision environment to get us to a point where Kentucky is on a track to eliminate the income tax entirely.
What do you see as the biggest challenge that is facing success for the Bluegrass Institute? And then the same question as, what's the biggest challenge that's holding Kentucky back?
I think they're similar, but I think there are a lot of people who understand liberty to be what I have, and they do not appreciate liberty as what we owe to each other and what other people are entitled to by virtue of their existence.
Yeah. Explain that a little bit.
And so I can complain about my property taxes,
Right.
and say, well, my property taxes are too high. They are too high, by the way. But I can complain about that,
Sure.
and that's something that affects me.
Right.
Or I can complain about new housing in my neighborhood because it will make traffic worse for me, or it will burden me in some way, that there'll be an apartment complex near my house.
Right.
Well, when you understand that liberty is for everybody,
Right.
when you understand that the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity is something that needs to be broad-based, I think it becomes much harder to say that your special privilege is the same thing as freedom.
Right.
It's just not.
It's just not.
The fact that you have some benefit
Right.
that has been bestowed by a government that also imposes some cost on someone else who did not sign up for it, it's a warped view of what freedom is. My friend Deidre McCloskey likes to say that we should endorse an equality of permission.
I like
which is
that.
to say we can all ply our trade, try out new things, and do whatever we want in just a broadly tolerant environment
Right.
for us to do that. Because equality of outcome doesn't work, and equality of opportunity is fine, but when you're handing out privileges here and there, that argument sort of falls apart as well. But everybody should have the same permission to try any number of things with their own lives, however they want to do it. I'm speaking very, very broadly. But the idea of viewing a privilege that you have as freedom is warped. It's deeply unprincipled, of course. And I just think it just betrays a lack of understanding of the principles that animate a free society.
Our colleagues in Calgary, up in Western Canada, Alberta Institute, have an interesting piece on permissionless society that's come out. I was reading recently, so part of why I wanted you to go deeper on that, this concept, I think is very interesting. I want to kind of wrap up the conversation here and bring it back a little bit deeper into Kentucky and just bring folks to the Kentucky experience, right? So let's say that you and I are having this interview in your office at the Bluegrass Institute.
Okay.
And we wrap up and we're like, hey, let's go grab a bite to eat. When we go out to what are we eating? What is, like, if you come to Kentucky, this is the meal you have to have. Welcome to Kentucky.
Okay. Well, I will say, and it's not because my name is Brown, but there is a dish known as the hot brown.
The hot brown,
which was invented, I believe, at the Brown Hotel in downtown Louisville, still there, and they serve an excellent hot brown at their restaurant there. But it is toast points, roasted turkey, and sliced tomatoes, thick cut bacon, and I believe it is a Mornay sauce, over the top.
Wow.
And then the items are warm, and then they broil it and bring it out to you, and it'll knock you out. And I think, I could be wrong, someone will correct me, I think this was originally on the late night menu at the Brown Hotel. About maybe a little more than 100 years ago. And so my thought was, and I could be wrong, that this was drunk people food.
The hot brown.
And it just so happens that it's also very good not drunk people food. But that's the dish that I would say everybody has to have when they come to Kentucky.
Noted. I'm going to have a hot brown. What if we're outside the office? What does Caleb do for fun? What are hobbies?
I take my kids to the park. We go to our little nerdy game store, comic book store with my family. We do a lot of traveling around the state. My wife and I just
beautiful state.
My wife and I just went to Whitehall. which is outside of Richmond,
Sure.
Kentucky. And it was the home of Cassius Clay, not Louisville's Cassius Clay, who became Muhammad Ali,
right.
but Cassius Marcellus Clay. And he was a wealthy man.
Yeah.
And but due to the fact that he existed in a prominent family, due to the fact that he was very wealthy and it was a farming family, he was surrounded by slavery. And he was able to go on a trip, not a trip, let me back that up. He was able to go to Yale University, where he was able to hear a speech from William Lloyd Garrison.
Ah, okay.
And Garrison, of course, the creator of the Liberator newspaper, one of the most important abolitionists of the 19th century, made an impression. And Cassius Clay came back to Kentucky and devoted himself almost fully to ending slavery. And Kentucky was, especially Lexington, Kentucky, was viewed as the last stop on the Underground Railroad.
Right.
That if they get through Lexington, they're off to freedom.
Right.
There's a reason that the Underground Railroad Museum is in Cincinnati.
Okay.
And so Clay he was not well liked for his vociferous advocacy for ending an immoral institution.
Right.
So he had to start his own newspaper because nobody would publish what he had to say. This was called The True American. And the subhead for the newspaper was devoted to universal liberty. And, of course, this made him enemies.
Sure.
And he had to put iron bars in his windows of his newspaper office in downtown Lexington. He put iron sheeting on his walls in order to prevent his office from being burned.
Really?
And in addition to his Bowie knife, which he was quite skilled with, and his dueling pistols, which he was quite skilled with, he placed on his desk 2 4-pounder, which is the ball, 4-pounder cannons on his desk, aimed at the front door of his office to anyone who made the mistake of coming in.
Wow.
And to me, I like to think of myself as a badass sometimes, but I don't hold a candle to somebody who sacrificed so much in pursuit of an end to a great moral evil. And so I'll say this, and I'll say it a lot. Kentucky kind of celebrates the wrong Clay. We celebrate Henry Clay, but we don't celebrate Cassius Clay enough, because he could have just been a rich guy sitting on his duff and enjoyed his life. But instead, he saw moral evil and decided that he was going to devote his life to getting rid of it. He's kind of, he in a sense, he's a North Star for us. That is, he committed himself fully to a task. Our struggles are less significant today than the abolition of human slavery. But I take a lot of inspiration from great Kentuckian.
Well, last question for you. I think you're touching on it a bit here, but I've been saving it for this point. What is it that drives you? What gives you hope in the work that you do?
What gives me hope is that people are basically good. And when apprised with the right information and appreciation for how institutions function, how they are built and how they are destroyed, and what mindsets are required in order to have a free society, I have hope that the next generation will see what we've got, decide that things can be better, and will focus their attention on making the world a freer place. And so with my kids, we talk about freedom a lot and what it means. And they're very curious. And it's for them. I have hope for them, that people like them with that curiosity, with that interest, with that desire to have as wide a range of abilities to do whatever you want in the world without harming others, that is something that will continue to be precious. And hopefully I can communicate that to my children as clearly as possible.
Caleb, thank you so much for your time today, for your leadership, and best of luck to you and Bluegrass Institute.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
And thank you for joining us today. You can find episodes like this anywhere that you get your podcast, be it YouTube, Spotify, Apple, anywhere. Just look for Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio. And if you would like to learn more about the work that partner organizations are doing in the worldwide freedom movement, go to atlasnetwork.org. Thanks for joining us for this conversation. We'll see you again next time.